Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's presentation entitled IT Security. It's time to confront the complex threat landscape. My name is Reagan Phillips, and I'm an account manager at CBI. Other co-presenters today will include Jeannie Buchanan and Van Coggins with Symantec's Cybersecurity Specialist team. So if you have any questions, we will answer as many as possible in the time allowed following the presentation. I'm sure some of you may know who CBI is, but I'm sure many of you do not know who we are or what we do. First and foremost, CBI is an IT risk management company. We understand what means the most to your company, your data, reputation, and brand. In front of you is a visual of what CBI does and how we do it. I'll start with the orange wedge in the bottom left corner. This is our compliance and governance segment. We help protect your ability to conduct business and your IT assets by analyzing where to start with your risk management program so it becomes a discipline across your enterprise. The opposing green wedge is our test and improvement segment. This is where we help you detect, react, plan, and execute against threats. Our vulnerability and pen testing assessments expose potential harmful gaps while allowing CBI to deliver back to you a focused picture on how to protect those critical assets. And just under those wedges is our operations and management segment. Our managed services ease the burden of administering complex technologies while offering financial flexibility to optimize CapEx and OpEx. We have world-class subject matter experts that can give you greater agility with consistency and quality so that you can deliver an optimized service. Lastly, in the blue section, this is where CBI can help defend, secure, and protect what is most important to your company. In conjunction with our strategic partnerships, we help minimize implementation risk and gain rapid return on your investment. Whether you need help at the network layer or the data layer, our experts can help you optimize business resilience solutions with real-world experience and expertise. Speaking of experience and expertise, I would like to introduce Jeannie Buchanan and Van Coggins. Jeannie is a cybersecurity services sales specialist at Symantec and has worked in the managed security space for over a decade. Jeannie, I will now turn it over to you to begin your focus presentation.
Thanks, Reagan. Appreciate everybody joining us today and interested in learning more about Symantec's managed security services. Just wanted to walk you guys through some metrics and data points about Symantec's business, specifically MSS business. So Symantec has been in the managed security services business for over 12 years. We acquired a company in 2002 called RipTech. And at the time, RipTech was one of the boutique managed security services providers out there. So Symantec has been in the leader position of the Gartner Magic Quadrant since the inception of the MSS Magic Quadrant. And important to note, kind of 2 points important to note, is one, that Symantec is the only MSSP that is in a leader position in the Gartner Magic Quadrant in all three that they have, meaning APJ, North America, and EMEA. Other piece that's kind of important in terms of the acquisition piece. So Symantec has, as all industries have do experience consolidation and mergers and acquisitions. But Symantec has only acquired one company, and we still function and have enhanced that one platform that was RipTech, that ultimately came from RipTech. And some of our competitors in the space are a combination of 5 and 6 different companies that have come together. So this is kind of an interesting data point in terms of the fact that Symantec has only made one acquisition in the MSSP space. So we have, we're serving over 1,500 major corporations, 60% of the global 10 and 44% of the global 100. So that's just to help you understand that we have lots of different customers represented in our customer base, global customers and lots of different industries represented. But we certainly have, our customer base is made up of all kinds of different companies, both big and small. From a data point around the ingestion of logs that we take on a daily basis, we analyze 22 billion logs daily, and we escalate over 400 severe security incidents to our customer base. The reason why I want to point this out is some folks haven't had experience in the past with managed security services providers. They might be under the impression that when this service is implemented and operational, that they might be overwhelmed by the number of alerts that we would potentially be sending their staff. So I point this out just to help from a contextual perspective to understand 400 severe security incidents across 1,500 customers really is not something that's going to overwhelm you when we implement the service and start supporting your infrastructure. From a security professional perspective, 100% of our analysts are GCIA certified via SANS. And so essentially what that means to customers is that you can rest assured that every analyst that you interact with and that's handling your incidents is going to do it in the same manner. It's very routine and very process-focused manner so that it's consistent throughout, regardless of what analyst that you work with. And ultimately, we look to become an extension of your staff. Most organizations that are looking to partner with MSSPs don't have the luxury of having large staff to pay attention to security monitoring, and they're hard to they're hard to find, they're hard to retain, and most organizations don't have the benefit of having enough budget to have a really robust team. So we look to become an extension, and ultimately, as an extension of your staff, that would include 200 Security Operations Center folks working in our Security Operations Center, 200 folks from an intel kind of threat research perspective that's specific to MSS, and then we have the greater 500 STAR team from Symantec, so that you ultimately have a pretty extensive group of people that are there as a resource if that's something that if you need some support from them. Symantec has a global presence. We have 5 SOCs worldwide. They are the primary SOC is in Herndon, Virginia, which is online for 16 hours a day, and typically is going to be servicing most US-based customers as primary. So we always have 2 SOCs online at the same time, but our other SOCs are in Chennai, India, Reading, UK, Sydney, Australia, and we have a SOC in Japan as well, but it's typically used for in-country customers and for native language support. Important to know, we have a modified follow the sun model. All of your log data does stay in the United States, but with a modified follow the sun, we actually have our SOCs are actually in use on a daily basis. And we have a 10-minute SLA notification, meaning that for critical and emergency events, once an analyst is presented the information to make a determination and categorize that incident, they have, if it's a critical or an emergency, they have 10 minutes to pick up the phone and notify you as a customer of what's going on. Important to note that the analyst who actually makes the determination as to what severity level the incident is also the same analyst that picks up the phone and can support you through the incident response to sort of remediation process. And then Symantec is a financially stable company that has a global presence. So rest assured that you're partnering with a company that's financially stable. So the value proposition for managed security services is pretty simple in terms of the fact that the expertise and staff are tough to retain. They're tough to find, they're tough to retain, and so ultimately it rely on Symantec's investment and expertise to provide a comprehensive security monitoring strategy at a fraction of the cost of what can be done in-house. Most organizations, even the really large Fortune companies, are not looking to do and replicate a security operations center and staffing levels the way that Symantec does. So ultimately, we ultimately can share that investment across our customer base and work with folks that are doing this 100% of the time and are totally focused on security all the time. And typically, in terms of business drivers, they're pretty standard. Regulatory and compliance requirements. Some folks want to have a desire for increased security analysis expertise. They want to have a more mature security program. They might have an audit finding that they need to remediate. They perhaps have experienced security breaches in the past, or their competitors have done so, and they want to make sure that they're not in the same position. They maybe have had some unsuccessful in-house attempts in terms of using an in-house SIM tool and just been able to, had some difficulties in terms of staffing. A lot of times boards and executives have security mandates. Obviously, what's going on in the threat landscape and in the media these days, it's certainly on the radar of boards and executives to pay attention to security. And then, like we talked about before, limited expertise and ability to retain the security staff. So just from a contextual perspective, while we're walking through this, we thought it would be good to share with you, because a lot of people ask that question, how much does something like this cost, or how is this priced? How are managed security services priced? So Symantec has two pricing options. One is device-based, which is pretty standard in the market in terms of the fact that there's, per device, there's two different costs associated. One would be a one-time implementation fee, and one would be ongoing service fee. In 2010, Symantec introduced enterprise-wide modeling. It's more of an unlimited monitoring sort of site license type concept. And this was really in response to customers asking, the concept of monitoring your network, your network and perimeter devices is certainly still important to do, but that strategy needed to evolve based on the ever-changing threat landscape. And so we were working to try to encourage our customers to have a more comprehensive monitoring strategy. And so that is why we introduced in 2010 the enterprise-wide model. It provides a lot of flexibility and predictability from a monitoring perspective, in that customers can add and remove devices without having to go through an additional contractual exercise. So it provides that fixed and predictable cost from a security monitoring perspective throughout the course of the contract. So it helps to facilitate that end-to-end endpoint sort of complete security protection. It provides more context and analysis, leading to improved detection. So we want to monitor as many logs as possible from as many different types of technologies to have context, and for our analysts to be able to give you a more complete picture about what is happening from a security event perspective across your infrastructure. So enterprise-wide pricing approach helps to facilitate that piece. It demonstrates compliance consistently across your organization, and it adapts readily to changing threats, business requirements, regulatory environments. So by the fact that you can make as many modifications and adjustments as needed, working with your service delivery manager and onboarding team versus having to go through a pricing exercise or contractual exercise to add devices. It has the ability to reduce costs in terms of it can reduce an organization's reliance on SIM or log management footprint. It certainly can help reduce the cost of storage. So we store your logs online for 92 days, and the remainder of that year would be stored offline. So we bear, as part of the MSS cost, we bear the storage cost. And it ultimately helps kind of redirect your internal resources to functions that are more core to your business. So we will do all the heavy lifting for you, and so your team doesn't have to spend the time wondering, do I go to this console and that console and look at what's going on in all these different places and do that heavy lifting. We bring all that all together and present it to you so that you can actually go to response mode and you can take action versus determining what's important to pay attention to. Ultimately, it provides that single pane of glass from a reporting and compliance perspective, in that we have a MSS portal that is going to be ultimately the tool that you use to sort of interface with, from an operational perspective, you interface with the service. And ultimately, it just provides improved security because it's consolidated collection, correlation analysis, and alerting. And I will turn it over to Van, my colleague, who is a senior engineer on the MSS and cybersecurity side.
Thank you, Jeannie. I will be going over some of the Symantec Managed Security Services offerings and a technical discussion on the architecture and some of the capabilities within the product itself. So let's start with the monitoring offerings. There are 3 levels of service that we offer for coverage of devices. Starting at the lowest level, the log retention level. Devices that are covered at the log retention level have the log data collected, sent to our SOC data center, stored online for 92 days, offline for 1 year, and this provides the ability to query those logs to look for certain event data within the portal. So these queries can be run, executed, exported into Excel, CSV, or XML formats. The key thing to understand about the log retention level is the logs from those devices that are covered at that level are not actively correlated against each other or against our global intelligence data warehouse. That correlation really begins at the next level. You'll see in the center the essential security monitoring. This is where all the same services of log retention are provided, meaning the collection of those logs, the 92 days of online data with the 1 year offline. But at this level, the active correlation begins. The queries at the SOC data center begin to happen where we're looking for those malicious patterns or events that indicate some kind of breach or incident may be occurring. This is also where the human analysts that Jeannie was talking about step in. They do their false positive analysis and then prioritization and notification with that 10-minute SLA for the severe level incidents. This also has integration with that data warehouse I talked about. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a couple slides, as well as anomalous traffic detection, so where we can see perimeter technologies and where there are changes in the patterns of traffic and do alerting. All of that's covered at the essential monitoring level. The next level up is our ATP, or Advanced Threat Protection add-on. This is a service that takes the specialized threat analysis and protection technologies such as FireEye or Palo Alto Wildfire, SourceFire, FireAmp, those technologies that do some post-analysis at the perimeter of the traffic that's coming through, and then alert you to the fact that something malicious may have come through the firewall. Those technologies, we take that information and then integrate that with an endpoint protection solution so that you can see where an attack seen at the perimeter might actually have impacted an endpoint. We also provide a management service for network IDP devices. So at the perimeter, Snort devices, SourceFire devices, Cisco IPS devices, we can actually do full management, lifecycle management of those products in addition to the monitoring. So that would be the default and incident management processes, the upgrade of the operating systems, the changes in signatures, things like that. So if that's something that's needed, we can also manage those devices. So Symantec's Managed Security Services is really designed to provide a framework for monitoring the security devices within the organization to collect that information and then correlate that against some form of external threat intelligence. Symantec, we have our Global Intelligence Network, which is a data warehouse of malware activity, fraud activity, vulnerability data. All of that information is then correlated against the logs. The logs are retained, the analysis is done, and then notification occurs on a 24/7 basis with global coverage from our global SOCs at a predictable budget with a staff that is 100% GAIC certified that you don't have to maintain. So a little bit about our Global Intelligence Network. You may hear or see the term GIN. I frame this as a data warehouse of threat intelligence. It is the largest commercially available threat intelligence database on the market basically contains information about malware activities, the malware intelligence that our STAR team is producing daily, has information about the latest vulnerabilities that are being discovered, as well as fraud activity that we're detecting from our email.cloud solutions, our web gateway solutions. A lot of this information is coming from Symantec products, but we also have sources from third-party organizations that we've got agreements with. So this is the information behind the scenes that is driving a lot of the correlation that is happening at the SOC. As those logs are being taken in, they are being matched against the activity or the identifiers that we have in the global intelligence network. So a little bit about the architecture of the service. On the left would be the customer premise, the devices that we are collecting logs from. Those can be firewalls, proxies, servers, applications operating systems. They could be the network intrusion detection systems. These logs are sent to a log collection platform, which is a device that Symantec's managed security services has within your organization. We manage that device, configure the collectors, and then work with your teams to make sure that the devices that we are collecting from are configured properly to send the logs to the log collection platform, but also at the right levels of logging so that we're getting meaningful information. Once that log data is collected, aggregated, compressed at the log collection platform, it is sent encrypted to the SOC data center. This is where the correlation occurs that queries against the global intelligence network and against the other data that we're collecting. And the analysts are presented with an incident when we see activity that matches indicators of compromise from the global intelligence network. The analysts step in, they do that false positive analysis and prioritization, and then alerting. And as Jeannie mentioned, the analyst that goes through that process is going to be the same analyst that picks up the phone and calls, based on a call tree, the individuals that need to be notified, and will work with you through the incident to determine what the impact is, what the priority is, what the remediation steps need to be, and work through to closure of a particular incident. One thing to note about the way we collect logs is that we're collecting all logs. We don't filter any logs at the customer site. There are some MSSPs out there that will filter out any information that appears to be authorized user activity by an authorized user. And that is a huge portion of the log data that any device sends. We want to collect all of that data. It provides better context to the analyst about what has happened during a security incident, what was occurring before, what was occurring after, and we don't miss anything. It's also something that a lot of attackers, hackers, or even malware will try to mimic, is authorized user, authorized activity. So by us taking in all of those logs, we're sure not to miss anything that might have been disguised as that kind of activity. Symantec's Managed Security Services is really designed to correlate information from the on-premise device, the devices that are within your organization, correlate that with that security intelligence and provide some actionable intelligence, some action items that are meaningful, and provide that visibility that you may be missing within the organization. Maybe there is no on-prem SIM and everybody's looking at logs individually. This correlation and combination or combining of information with the intelligence network really gives you some information that you can take and focus on the specific incidents that are of priority within the organization, instead of having to chase down every single incident or event that is occurring. Earlier, I mentioned our advanced threat protection, which is the highest level of our monitoring service. This is the latest addition of capabilities that we added to our MSS service. So I wanted to dive in a little bit deeper into how the advanced threat protection service actually works. In order to really understand how that service works, we first need to understand the traditional perimeter security technologies, and then the newest level or category of technologies that are out there. Obviously, the traditional firewalls, the stateful packet inspection type firewalls still exist, and we do collect those. We then have app-aware technologies. Palo Alto, for an example, is a great app-aware perimeter technologies. We've got universal threat management devices out there that combine IDS and network traditional firewall type applications or devices, as well as even some app-aware technologies. These can be all combined into a UTM type technology. The latest acronym, if you will, is STAP. I mentioned earlier the Specialized Threat Analysis and Protection Devices. This is a new term coined by IDC. Basically, the one that most people are familiar with is FireEye. This is the technology that watches the perimeter, and as traffic comes through the perimeter, it inspects the files, the executables, the DLLs, the doc files, PDF files, and it puts them into a virtual environment and executes them. Does code explosion to see what exactly happens when that file is accessed. There are others that fall into the STAP category. I mentioned Palo Alto. Palo Alto has a capability called Wildfire. Checkpoint has a new service called the Threat Emulation Service, and then SourceFire has their AMP for networks. And all of these technologies, in some form or fashion, do a post-perimeter inspection of that traffic to see what those files actually are. So the problem with these technologies is that generally they will let the traffic through, and then after some kind of evaluation, they will notify the security administrators that something got through, it was headed for an endpoint with this IP address, and then the security teams have to work with the endpoint teams, if they're separate teams, and chase down the discovery or the analysis of whether the endpoint was indeed impacted, or did the endpoint protection solution in place actually protect the device, or was the threat not even detected. And that's very cumbersome manual process to have to chase down all the way from the edge to the endpoint. With the advanced threat protection capability, we're taking in that information from those STAP technology devices and then combining it with the endpoint protection alerts to provide incident notification that has the contextual detail about whether an endpoint is actually impacted, so that you can spend less time chasing down the potential impact to a endpoint that was protected. The endpoint protection solution may have blocked it, may have quarantined the machine, or taken some form of protective action, and there's no need to spend a lot of time trying to find or discover that. So the advanced threat protection will take in the information from the network security STAP device. It will take in the alerts from the endpoint protection device. It will combine those as well as inspect the information that was provided by those solutions. It will compare that to our global intelligence network, our file insight, file reputation database, and then provide back an incident with actionable real data. Does something need to happen, and allow you to stop wasting time on actions that are just not needed. So from a flow kind of process, the attacker here in the top left would either via email or via a web page have a threat pass through the firewall. The STAP technology will inspect that information, and then based on its findings as well as the findings from the endpoint, will send that information to MSS, the SOC, where that correlation occurs, as well as that comparison to the file reputation database, and then notification occurs. The outcome in most cases will be that the endpoint was indeed protected. But in the case where the endpoint solution did not detect it or had no way to protect the device, that information will be presented back in the incident, the fingerprint information, threat behavior, the file reputation, origin of the information that we're getting. Was it from the STAP device? Was it from the endpoint device? As well as a lot of links to additional information, virus total, as well as others that will give you more information about the piece of malware or the attack itself. So today we work with 4 technologies. FireAmp or FireEye is not listed on this slide, but it is also covered. Again, the Checkpoint Threat Emulation Service, the Palo Alto Wildfire, and the SourceFire AMP for networks are the 4 key technologies that we correlate with. The endpoint technologies is the Symantec endpoint protection, as well as the McAfee antivirus. So a little bit about the SOCs themselves, as well as the people, the operations teams that you will be working with. Jeannie touched on the fact that we have 5 SOCs. The 4 main SOCs are listed here. The Japan SOC is really for regional support, local language support. The staffing is all Symantec employees. We do not use contractors or third parties to do any staffing in the SOCs themselves. The SOCs are tightly controlled man traps, very restricted access to the SOC itself. It's also got a segregated network from the rest of the Symantec Corporation. From a people process, we have dedicated individuals that get assigned to each organization that works with our managed security services. And this is something different than a lot of traditional MSSPs. Every customer is assigned to what we call a pod, which is a group of service delivery manager, analysts, transition specialists. The service delivery manager is really the go-to person for most of the relationship and development and service review type processes. They will conduct regular calls to do the monthly service reviews, come up with action items or list of things that need to be performed or requests that have been made. But they are not going to dive down into the technical details of a specific security incident. They will enlist the analyst that's also in the pod. Many times that analyst will know about an incident. As a matter of fact, most times they're going to know about that incident far before the service delivery manager gets involved. But you will have a common analyst that you can work with so that they are familiar with your environment, your technologies, the history of the types of attacks that have occurred. And it makes it much easier for them to triage something or to investigate something, having had that historical context of the organization. There's also an assigned transition specialist. So the transition specialist is the person who will work with your organization to make sure that the onboarding process occurs in a timely fashion. They'll make sure that that log collection technology is configured right, work with your team through that deployment process, work with your security team to make sure that the actual devices, the firewalls, the NIDs, are configured to send the logs to the LCP, as well as make sure that the right logging level occurs. There is another member of the teams for those customers who have managed network intrusion detection systems. There is an engineering team that you will work with, and again, you'll have a common engineer that is familiar with your devices. And then obviously behind the scenes is our product management team. Quite often the product management team will work with customers to make sure that we're up to speed on some of the upcoming requirements or projects that they may have. So in summary, some of the key business strengths is the high customer touch, the dedicated personnel, those service delivery managers, the analysts, the engineers, onboarding specialists, highest industry-leading SLA with a 10-minute escalation for emergency and critical, global footprint regarding SOX, follow the sun methodology. We are also ISO 27001 and PCI certified, which as of last couple weeks ago when I looked, we are the only MSSP that's on the Visa website for the being PCI compliant service provider. Very flexible options when it comes to licensing with the enterprise-wide option. From a technical perspective, Jeannie mentioned the one acquisition in 10 years. So we're working with the same platform that we've been expanding over time, unlike many of the other MSSPs that have kind of brought together many acquisitions and are trying to tie together multiple technologies. Extremely broad coverage from a device perspective, from firewalls, IDPs, and proxies at the edge, all the way down to the endpoint protection solutions, as well as the operating systems of the devices themselves. The combination of our global intelligence network, again, this is something that Symantec has that other MSSPs can claim to have, but they can't claim to have such a large and broad network intelligence data warehouse. And then lastly, some differentiators. The log retention is included. Most other MSSPs out there, if you want log retention, it is something that is an extra line item that has to be purchased. This is included in the Symantec offering. A significant investment in the portal with quarterly enhancements. SOC tours are available, analyst interaction. You can sit with the analyst and your service delivery managers. And then a focus on the advanced persistent threats with the advanced threat protection offering that we discussed at the end here. And that is it.
Thank you, Van and Jeannie, for the excellent presentation today. So we have a few minutes left for questions and answers. So I'll go ahead and start with the first question. Is Symantec MSS able to detect malware infection without endpoint protection logs?
So yes, what Symantec's MSS can do, regardless of whether we are collecting logs from, say, Symantec Endpoint Protection or Sophos or any of the other endpoint protection solutions out there, if we're taking in logs, say, from just firewalls, and we're looking at the ports, the protocols, the URLs, the IP addresses that the communication outbound is going to, a lot of times, based on our global intelligence network, we can detect the patterns that we have already defined or discovered when our STAR team is analyzing a specific piece of malware. So we may know a particular piece of malware communicates over a specific port to a specific IP address, and just by seeing that traffic, we have a very high level of confidence that there's an endpoint within the organization that has that malware infection.
Great, perfect, thank you. Next question is, can customers create custom queries of events?
So yes, we are taking in the data from the various security devices. That aggregation and delivery to the SOC data center occurs. 92 days of data by default is stored online. Within the portal, there is a place to do custom log queries. So even if a particular log is not associated to a security incident, say you're looking for successful logins of a specific individual, there's no incident related to it, you want to show the last 7 days of that person's logins. Yes, you can run queries against that, return the results, export it again as CSV, Excel, XML data, whatever you need.
Excellent. And let's see. Next one I have is, are logs filtered on-site at the customer's location?
No. So I mentioned earlier that we collect 100% of the logs. There are MSSPs out there that do try to filter out logs that they deem are not relevant, and we don't feel that that's the right approach. So we're collecting 100% of the logs so that we can see those activities that might be masked as authorized user, authorized activity, if you remember that slide. So we definitely don't filter out anything at the customer site.
Excellent, Van. I've got another question too. Will Symantec work with us and help us create custom reports to be delivered on a regular basis?
Yes, so we have an extensive reporting database of predefined reports, and we have a reporting team within the SOC. And if there are specific reports that may not exist in the portal already, then that reporting team will work with you to determine if we even have the data needed to generate the report, and B, if it's something that we actually can generate. But that team its specific goal is to work with customers on those custom kinds of reports that may be needed. And, eventually I've seen in the past where those requests for specific kinds of reports become actual predefined reports in the portal, so something that every customer will be able to generate on their own, when needed.
Okay. And the final question was how would we request changes to reports? I think you just kind of answered that.
The main way to make that request, so there's multiple ways. You could always open up a request within the portal itself. There's a place to create a request that assigns a request number. The other option would be to work through the service delivery manager. That person that's not the analyst that I mentioned is assigned to the organization. They're always there, ready to talk, pick up the phone, call them, and describe what it is you're looking for. And they can coordinate meetings between your organization and the report gen team so that you can all determine, exactly what is it we need and can it be done.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much, Van. We really appreciate your time today. If you do have further questions today, we can follow up later. And again, I'd like to thank Van and Jeannie for today's presentation and wish everybody a great rest of your day. Thank you.